everybody. Thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, my name is Madison. I do work in the Akashic Records, which is your soul's library. And I also do a lot in the realm of Reiki energy healing. And more recently, I've been getting into the realm of quantum healing. So today we're going to be doing an episode that is a part of a series where I'm going in and sort of doing some research on conspiracy theories, and then I'm going in remote viewing the conspiracy theories and combining it all together. So if you are not familiar with what remote viewing is, it is the ability to essentially project your consciousness to a place that you are not. And if you are clairvoyant, you can have visual experiences while you're there. And so there's been a lot of maybe validation around remote viewing over the years. There's a ton of declassified CIA documents if you want to learn more about remote viewing. And there's also a ton of different things around astral projection as well. So if that's something you want to look into, I believe I have an episode of it on YouTube, but lots of cool stuff there. Okay, so today we're going to talk about, is the Denver airport a fallout shelter for the elite's depopulation agenda? And so I was trying to figure out like how to encompass all the pieces of this episode into one title, and that is what we came up with. So I've been interested in this probably since 2012, 2015. And so a little background on me, I would definitely have been somebody that would have fallen into like the conspiracy theory demographic probably 10 years ago, where I've never necessarily believed all the conspiracy theories, but I've always been very interested in, if people believe this, why, what's factual, and what is just maybe fabrications, and then trying to do a little bit of that truth seeking myself, right? So Denver I've been interested in because I have been traveling in Colorado and Wyoming for my whole life. I love it out there, but I've always noticed there's a very different energy with being in the Denver airport. Whenever you arrive, it almost feels like you're in a portal, but then there are some areas that you walk through that are just like really like itchy, like I kind of want to crawl out of my skin and run down this hallway, and like everything in between, right? So I'm going to talk about all of that, and we're also going to get into a lot of the facts around the Denver airport versus maybe people's perceptions, right? We're also going to talk about whistleblower accounts and my remote viewing experience. So the old airport was decommissioned, and the new Denver airport was moved 25 miles outside the city. If you've ever flown into Denver, you know that like you fly into the Denver airport, but to get to actually like downtown Denver, it's like 30 to 40 minutes depending on traffic. So I've always thought this was odd. Like, why is it the Denver airport, but like you gotta drive quite a bit to actually get to Denver, right? That is just something that people thought was odd. Like, why did we decommission this airport? Why did we move it so far outside the city? And that, if you look into it realistically, there's mixed opinions. There are people that say that there was nothing wrong with the old airport and there was no reason to move it. There are people that say that the old airport did not have the functionality and the space for the amount of people that were coming in, and everything in between. So that's sort of one of those things where it's like you could kind of fall on either side of it. Facts. The airport went over $2 billion over. So they ended up spending $4.8 billion on this airport, which was $2 billion more than maybe what was allotted or projected for this project. And what's interesting about this is that Denver Airport is a total of 53 square miles, which is 2 times larger than the actual largest airport in America in terms of traffic and people coming in and out. So why do you have such a big airport for a place that isn't as busy as some of the other airports that cost less money? There's just a lot of like speculation that started to come through. So some of the things, just in terms of other facts, they have the longest runway in the country, and there's not necessarily like a reason for that, not in a commercial airport like that at least. And so this airport or this runway is over 3 miles long, and so a lot of people are like, why do you need this? Like it doesn't logistically make sense for what the operations here are supposed to be, unless there was to be maybe a large influx of planes to come like all at once, right? So, other things, there were a lot of buildings that were built wrong, and for whatever reason, they were just told to like bury those buildings. There's no proof of this though. This is whistleblower accounts. So let's get into whistleblower accounts. Obviously, like the longest runway thing, that's obviously a fact. But the buried buildings, there's no proof of this, but there are a lot of whistleblower accounts. So one of the main whistleblowers in all of this is a guy named Phil Schneider, and he's a whistleblower in a lot of different CIA cover-ups over the years. And so Phil is actually one of the whistleblowers that said that the bunkers were buried and that the buildings were buried, and that the system below is actually deeper than they have reported. But what's interesting about this is whenever you look into kind of the whistleblower accounts, there are a couple things that are really clear. So one of them is the operations were really siloed, meaning that like the right arm didn't know what the left arm was doing. And this, okay, could that have been intentional? Sure. Could this have just been bad business? Because that's how a lot of businesses are run, unfortunately, where nobody really knows everything that's going on, so there's mistakes. That's also a very real problem in businesses as they run today, and I'm sure back in the 90s as well. So that's one of those that it's like kind of hard to like, were there silo operations? I think objectively, yes. Does that mean that they were trying to hide something versus maybe just not having the best business practices? Hard to tell. But that was one of the things that Phil Schneider had in his account, was that there was a lot of siloed operations. Nobody knew what anybody was doing, and that was done on purpose. The other thing is that there's a ton of workers' accounts outside of Phil's that talk about there being a tunnel system under the airport. And originally they were sort of like, oh yeah, there is a tunnel system under the airport, but it's for baggage, right? And there was, and they did use it at one point for baggage, but not for very long. So then there ended up being this abandoned tunnel system that people were like, oh yeah, that's how, they get to the bunkers, right? And so all of this is really based on the concept that a lot of people think that all of this additional money went to build bunkers for the elites under the Denver airport. That's why the runway is so long, is so if a ton of planes came in at once, and all these elites, had to be in one place at once to get to their bunkers, so that they would have the ability to do that, right? That's essentially kind of the theory around it versus what we're unpacking here. So other weird things, if you look at like an overhead view of the map of Denver, the runways form a swastika, which is odd for sure. And then there's also this, if you've ever been to the Denver airport, like you have to admit this is creepy. There is this blue Mustang horse with like these red beady eyes. And even before, so I've been flying into Denver since I was a kid. And so I can remember even before I knew about this theory, like whenever we drove by the Mustang, like I would literally not want to make eye contact with it. Like I don't know what it is. It feels like if you make eye contact with it, there's some negative something that you're interacting with. I'm not sure if it's an entity or what, but it's creepy, right? And that's something that whenever I heard that a lot of people think that this, some people think that like the horse maybe has an entity that is, attached to it. Some people believe that it's just kind of like the fourth horse of the apocalypse, is sort of the sign of like, if you're in the apocalypse and you're looking for shelter, you're in the right place, right? So there's a ton of different theories around that. Regardless of what you believe, you have to admit it's kind of creepy. Okay, this is one of the things that I was more interested in. So the Freemasons are talked about a lot through this conspiracy theory. So let's talk about the real things. There is absolutely a dedication to the Freemasons in the airport, where it says that the airport was dedicated to the Freemasons through the New World Airport Commission. A lot of people believe that the Freemasons are a group that is tied to the New World agenda, where there would be this one world government, and that is tied to just a lot of things that are coming to light right now with the Epstein files and how everything is sort of planned, like all the documents of like the world wars coming out and like all this sort of stuff. There's a lot where people are kind of connecting all the dots now. So this is very odd because whenever you look into the New World Airport Commission, it technically doesn't exist, but it did temporarily exist as a committee for that airport when it was commissioned. So that I think is very odd. And so if you're not familiar with who the Freemasons are, I'll probably do a separate episode on that. I need to learn a little bit more than I currently know. But essentially what I've learned about the Freemasons is if you track the lineage of the Freemasons back, the Freemasons were at one point the Templar Knights. And the Templar Knights were this group of knights that were during the time of like Christians being persecuted. They went out and said they were protecting the Christians, but really they were trying to find the Ark of the Covenant because the Ark of the Covenant was supposed to lead to like eternal life, right? So there's a lot of history there where a lot of people believe that the Freemasons are a group that have knowledge and power beyond what we can all see and understand and comprehend. And I do very much believe there is some level of power they hold. To what? I'm not sure, but this definitely emphasizes or maybe highlights that the people that believe that the Freemasons want the New World Order, it sort of amplifies or sheds light on that theory, right? Okay, so now let's get into murals. This is the part where I mentioned, like, whenever you first get to the airport, it feels like a portal. Like, you walk into the airport off the plane, like, it's like this high vibe energy. You feel like you're in a portal. I don't know how to describe it, right? And, like, I'm kind of, like, I feel that a little bit every time I fly. Like, whenever I kind of, like, get out of the airport, I'm like, ooh, you know? But there's a different energy in the Denver airport. I don't know how else to describe it. But then there's also quite a few, like, hallways that you go down just because the airport's huge and you have to go, like, it's one of those you have to like take a tram to the different terminals and all that. And there's some times you go down these hallways and the murals are like, they make you like itchy. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. Some of the mural examples are like Nazis in gas masks that are kind of like terrorizing cities. There is a mural that people believe sort of pointing to the New World Order, where basically all the countries are handing their flag over to one person. And there is also a lot of like children's in coffins, cities being burned, and more recently, they have done things where they sort of do reptilian jokes. Like, people think that there are reptilians under the Denver airport, and so they do these like sort of jokes where they'll be like, haha, can you believe they think the reptilians run this airport? And like, they've sort of taken the conspiracy and made it into a joke, which is like, I feel like really doubling down on like, this isn't true, right? But it also feels like a lot of effort to address a conspiracy theory if it isn't true, you know? So just things to think about. Okay, so now let's talk about this. A lot of the murals are believed to be depicting the New World Order. They are believed to be depicting some sort of event where a large part of the population is taken out, or all the population comes under one leader as opposed to all these different leaders in all these different countries, right? And so a lot of people, you know, if you get into like the theories around COVID-19, a lot of people believe that COVID-19 was a trial run for global pandemic to see not only how well would people comply, but also how different populations could be targeted. So interesting fact about me, my dad died from COVID, and my dad was 55, 54, 55, and he had been undergoing treatment for lung cancer. And so he was absolutely in the minority of people, right? In terms of that really niche group that was very able to be really heavily impacted. So what's interesting is we were, you know, going through that. My dad was in ICU and then sedated and on a ventilator for about a month. And in that time, you know, there were lots of conversations. And one that really stood out to me, at this point, I didn't know any of the, you know, theories about COVID because my dad died in 2020. So like the pandemic had just kind of started and it came out. Nobody knew what the fuck was happening. And then, you know, like we went through this like pretty traumatic experience. And one of the doctors, I specifically remember saying, like, hey, there are a lot of people that believe that there is something in this virus that is specifically targeting 50 to 80-year-old men. And specifically, more white men were dying than of other ethnicities, but specifically the most was that demographic of men, right? And so there were absolutely some theories that, like, specifically the old white men are a lot of the old earth belief system, the patriarchy, and if we want to dissolve that and come under a new world government, we do have to kind of get rid of the people that are embedded in the system, so to speak, because the system has to be dismantled for a new one to come together. So that's kind of how that all ties together. Is there are a lot of people that believe that that group was targeted because that group is not open-minded, they're not going to be swayed, they're going to be like, I believe what I believe. And that's very much that was very much my dad to a T, right? So just a lot of things, how it all always ties together. Okay, so let's talk about Phil Schneider for one more second. So Phil Schneider was basically one of the people that said that underneath the Denver airport there was this military base, there were tunnels, and Phil Schneider was very clear, like he was one of the people that was actively like, hey, I am not suicidal, I am not depressed, I am actually doing really well. If I ever come up like having committed suicide, like I did not. And then of course he speaks out about the Denver airport and a bunch of other whistleblower things that he was a part of, and he is found to have taken his own life. And if you follow whistleblowers, normally what happens is they either OD or take their own life, and that is sort of the way that they're able to capitalize on that, right? Because if you say somebody OD'd or took their own life, people aren't going to ask questions, right? They're just like, oh my God, that's so sad. Ugh, I don't want to talk about it. That's uncomfortable. I'm going to leave it, right? And so those are, it feels like maybe easy things for them to maybe do in terms of kind of controlling what information gets out in terms of whistleblowers, right? So let's get into my remote viewing experience. Oh, I'm kind of scared to share this on YouTube. I like went back and forth for a while about like, should I share this remote viewing experience on YouTube? Because I feel like a lot of my more I don't know if questionable content, my more content that has maybe the potential to be a little bit maybe dangerous. I normally post on my 5D website where like my like membership is. So this one I kind of went back and forth, like, are you sure I'm supposed to post this on YouTube? Because I don't know. And very much the answer was like, yes, you are very much supposed to put this on YouTube. So let's get into it. So whenever I remote view, a lot of times if I'm going somewhere where I believe there might be negative entities or forces, I'll bring in at least one of my spirit guides to go with me. So in this session, I, kind of disconnected. And for me, I kind of have this process of almost like sort of disconnecting my consciousness and kind of popping it into like an astral body. And then that astral body is what moves to wherever I want to go, right? So I had one of my spirit guides come in and I said, hey, I want to go to remote view underneath the Denver airport. I want to see, like, is there a military base? Is there reptilians? Like, what is the deal? Can you come with me? Can you keep me safe? So that's kind of the background of normally what I do if I'm doing anything like this, right? And then I do like my shielding, my protection, I have my crystals, blah, blah, blah. So we did something really weird, which is normally when I remote view, it almost feels like I go from like where I am right now through like a portal to the destination, and then I come out kind of like on top of the destination. This time we very clearly did kind of the same thing, but it was like we were going like underneath the earth, and then we came out kind of in this underground military base, but we didn't come in through the top, we came in through the bottom. And I was very much like, whoa, what's happening? And the spirit guide that I had on this journey with me was like, oh, there's psychic soldiers, which is very common. A lot of the military bases, especially the underground ones, that there are theories around. There's a lot of people that try to remote view them. So there's a lot of psychic soldiers that will essentially kind of like kick out your astral body, if that makes sense. And And so it was pretty much like, this is the only way, like you couldn't like go in like through the airport and then like try to go down, because the psychic soldiers are like set up to sort of stop you. And so instead you have to go in through the bottom. And I was like, fucking crazy. Okay, let's do it. So we're there. And immediately I can tell there is absolutely a military base that we're immediately kind of in. In this military base, I mean, it's like a city, right? Like, I'm not talking like it's like a small military base and like it's like a room. It's like, I mean, the spot we dropped into, I could see SUVs, I could see like a whole fleet of vehicles, I could see armored like tanks. Like, that's how big this space is that we dropped into. And it was very clear, I absolutely saw humans that were in some sort of military something, I don't know what, working with reptilians. And if you do not know what reptilians are the lizard people. And I have done a lot of remote viewing and channeling the Akashic records whenever I first heard about the lizard people. Like, is this real? What's the dealio? And from my experience in remote viewing, the reptilians are absolutely real. This is my second time ever actually seeing them. I remote viewed another underground military base and I saw them there as well. And so this is really my second time like ever actually seeing them in a remote viewing, but I'm also just now getting into the realm of trying to remote view some of these theories that I want to figure out more about, right? So basically it's like the reptilians they're kind of like dinosaurs, but like smaller. Like, picture like a 10-foot tall T-Rex, but maybe like a little bit longer arms. That's kind of what they looked like. And so it's very clear like the reptilians and the humans are working together. The reptilians are sort of in control of the humans. And I had a couple very horrific sort of scenes that I was shown. So it was almost shown like the military base was broken up into two, right? So there's one section that's just bunkers, and those are just like empty, right? Like, those are literally just like, should people need them? And I asked how many bunkers there were, and the answer that I got was 125 bunkers. And what specifically came through that were that those 125 bunkers, in order to basically get one, you had to agree to go through programming or training, which was the MK Ultra programming. And so there's a lot of information that just came out in the Epstein files about how the government has used MK Ultra to program celebrities to be compliant, or to push certain agendas over the years. And so what I was shown was this basically process of, in order for them to be able to get one of the bunkers, they have to be one of these highly influential figures, and they have to agree to go through training, which is MK Ultra programming, in order to get one of the bunkers, right? And what was coming through there was, I sort of asked, like, who are the 125 people that have bunkers here, right? Because I've really been trying to figure out who is actually in charge of the world. And what I've come up with so far is that there's like the 13 families that are in charge of the world. There's some different theories on who all falls into those 13 families. And then there is the committee of 300 under them, which is the committee of 300 families. So there's 13 main families and then 300 families that kind of report to them. And that's essentially who's making all the decisions and pulling all the strings behind the scenes, right? And so what I was being shown was, I don't think that any of the 13 families had bunkers in the airport. I think it was part of the committee of 300 that specifically was in maybe North America that had the Denver bunkers, because it was almost like, oh yeah, everybody in like the 13 families, like they already have their own bunker system. They are already taken care of should there be some sort of depopulation agenda. And these were more the people that maybe didn't have, you know, the ability to have these, you know, million and $billion underground bunkers, right? So yeah, that's what I saw. It, unfortunately, I do think is real. And it's interesting. I sort of was trying to figure out like, how deep were we? And it was very clear we were like, one of the whistleblowers said that, you know, it's said that there are 6 layers underground, and that's like no knowledge, reported knowledge, and that there's another two that are not listed, but they exist, and that's where, you know, a lot of this takes place. And so I asked the guide, like, hey, is this those other two bunkers? Like, is that why they're able to have this whole operation? And the answer is very clearly yes. Like, this is basically 7 and 8, or like floor like 7 and 8 underneath, that nobody maybe can prove that it exists outside of really remote viewers, right? I did not get any information on like how you would get from 6 to 7, like how you would be able to get down there, which very clearly means that either it's not safe or it's not the right time or something, right? So that's what came through in this crazy episode of remote viewing the Denver airport. So yeah, I do believe that there's bunkers under there now. I do definitely believe that there is, you know, interdimensional beings that are sort of controlling everything. And in terms of the depopulation agenda, I mean, I think that they have to have bunkers for a reason. Is that because there's a depopulation agenda, or is that because they just want to be prepared should there be some sort of event? Hard to tell, right? So yeah, that is what this episode is about. So if you guys like this sort of content, like me remote viewing, I have a lot of this on my 5D membership on my website. You can try it for a week for free, and after that it's only $22 a month. If you want to work with me one-on-one, I do Akashic Records readings from anywhere in the world. They are over Zoom or in person in Greensboro. I also do Akashic Records classes over Zoom or in person in Greensboro. If you want to learn how to connect to your spirit guides, your Akashic Records, that is what that work is about. I also do Reiki energy healing sessions and Reiki energy healing classes. So you can find all of that information on my website, linked in the show notes and in my bio. I will see you guys for the next episode. Normally I do new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so I would love to see you for the next one. Love to have you follow along with the channel and be part of the community. Okay, bye.